Elena Vasquez pushed her cleaning cart through the sterile corridors of Blackwater Security Consulting at 5:47 a.m., her footsteps silent on polished marble floors. The building hummed with the quiet efficiency of a machine designed to move money and weapons through channels that didn't officially exist. At 29, Elena had perfected the art of invisibility. Hunched shoulders, downcast eyes, movements calculated to register as background noise in the consciousness of people who believed their expensive suits made them untouchable. She wore a faded gray uniform with Elena embroidered in cursive letters, her dark hair pulled back in a utilitarian ponytail. The security guard at the front desk barely glanced up as she badged in. "Morning, Elena," he mumbled, already returning to his crossword puzzle. After 18 months of the same routine, she had become part of the building's infrastructure, as unremarkable as the motivational posters lining the walls or the artificial plants gathering dust in corner offices. Blackwater occupied 3 floors of a nondescript building in McLean, Virginia, just close enough to Washington, D.C., to attract the kind of clients who paid premium rates for problems to disappear quietly. On paper, they provided security consulting for Fortune. In reality, they facilitated transactions that existed in the gray spaces between legal and profitable. Elena began her morning rounds on the executive floor, starting with the conference room where deals were structured to look like legitimate business while functioning as something else entirely. She moved through the space with practiced efficiency, dusting surfaces while her trained eyes cataloged documents carelessly left visible, noting which secure phones had been used recently, memorizing subtle changes in security protocol. Her fingers traced along the mahogany conference table, feeling for the slight depressions left by pens pressed hard during tense negotiations. She photographed documents with a camera disguised as a cleaning spray bottle, each artificial shutter sound masked by the whisper of microfiber cloth against wood. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the Potomac River flowed past, carrying secrets just as she did. The real Elena Vasquez had died in a car accident in Honduras 2 years ago. The woman who had assumed her identity was Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, U.S. Army Intelligence, currently 18 months into the most sensitive deep-cover operation of her career. As morning light crept across the conference table, Elena prepared for another day of being systematically ignored by people planning operations that threatened American interests. She had endured 18 months of condescension, casual racism, and the particular blindness that made wealthy criminals treat service workers as invisible. But invisibility was a weapon. Every dismissive comment, every carelessly spoken detail, every document left unguarded because Elena doesn't speak English well enough to understand all of it fed into an intelligence picture that would eventually destroy the network she had spent so long infiltrating. Today, like every day for the past year and a half, Elena Vasquez would clean offices while Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell documented the evidence needed to bring down one of the most sophisticated arms trafficking operations in the Western Hemisphere. The only question was whether she could complete the mission before they realized who she really was. At 8:30 a.m., the real business began. Elena was dusting bookshelves in Marcus Blackwood's corner office when the CEO arrived with 2 men she had been tracking for months. Victor Kozlov and Chen Wei-Ming represented the kind of international connections that made Blackwater dangerous: Eastern European weapons suppliers with Chinese manufacturing contacts and no ethical constraint. Elena immediately shifted into her perfected routine, shoulders hunching further as she focused intensely on cleaning the same section of bookshelf. Her English would become more halting if anyone addressed her directly. Her movements would slow to suggest simple-mindedness, and her entire presence would fade into background irrelevance. "The shipping manifest arrived this morning," Blackwood said, settling behind his desk without acknowledging Elena's existence. 200 AK-47s, 50 RPGs, standard ammunition loads. "Your Central American contacts confirmed." Kozlov consulted his encrypted tablet. MS-13 leadership in San Salvador transferred the down payment yesterday. "They're desperate for hardware since the government crackdown began. We can charge premium pricing." Elena's training kicked in as she processed information that would save American lives. This wasn't just arms dealing. It was weapons flowing from Eastern Europe through American facilitators to Central American gangs, destabilizing the exact regions where U.S. forces were trying to maintain peace. "The beauty of our business model," Chen added, glancing dismissively at Elena, "is operational security through social invisibility. Our cleaning staff, security guards, maintenance workers, they see everything and understand nothing." "This one's been particularly useful," Blackwood agreed, waving toward Elena without looking at her. "Elena's cousin supposedly works at Baltimore Port Authority. She provides shipping schedules without realizing their significance. Elena kept her expression neutral while internally cataloging another piece of the intelligence puzzle. They had constructed elaborate background stories to justify her presence, creating fake family connections they could exploit for information gathering. Roberto Vasquez, her fictional cousin, was actually a cover identity maintained by Army intelligence specifically to support her operation. The meeting continued for 40 minutes. Elena learned about weapons caches hidden throughout Northern Virginia, corrupt port officials facilitating illegal shipments, and a network of Central American contacts that reached into the highest levels of several governments. Each detail would be transmitted to her handlers within hours. When they finally left for lunch, Elena remained in Blackwood's office, photographing documents they had consulted during the meeting. Financial records showing payments to corrupt officials, shipping manifests detailing weapons transfers, communication logs that would implicate dozens of co-conspirators. But as she prepared to leave, footsteps in the hallway made her freeze. Davidson, Blackwood's head of security and the one person in the building who had always watched her with suspicious eyes, had returned early from lunch. "Elena," he called sharply in Spanish, "I need to speak with you." Elena's heart rate spiked, but her training held. She had been in more dangerous situations than this, facing enemy interrogators who made Davidson look like an amateur. Still, 18 months of careful work could be destroyed by a single mistake. She turned with the confused, slightly nervous expression she had perfected, waiting to see if her cover would hold. Davidson entered Blackwood's office with the predatory confidence of someone who had survived multiple combat deployments by correctly reading people and situations. Former Marine Force recon with the kind of tactical awareness that made him dangerous to undercover operatives who got careless. "Elena, come here," he said, switching to English. "I want to show you something." Elena approached with the hesitant steps of someone who understood authority but not necessarily language. She had spent months perfecting the exact level of comprehension that would make her useful for basic tasks, while appearing too limited for complex conversation. Davidson pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph of the conference room taken by security cameras that morning. "You see this image? This shows you cleaning during our meeting. But look at your position." Elena studied the photograph with apparent confusion while her mind raced through tactical assessments. Davidson was testing her, probing for reactions that would confirm his suspicions. "I no understand, sir," she replied in heavily accented English. "I clean good, no problem." "The problem," Davidson said slowly, "is that you were positioned to hear everything we discussed. Most cleaning staff would have left when we arrived. You stayed, worked slower, found reasons to remain in the room." Elena's training provided the perfect response, genuine confusion mixed with defensive pride in her work ethic. "I work hard, sir. Always finish job complete. No leave until everything clean." Davidson studied her face with the intensity of someone who had interrogated prisoners in Afghanistan. "Where in Honduras are you from originally?" "Tegucigalpa," Elena replied immediately. "Big city, very dangerous. My family come here for better life." "And your cousin Roberto at Baltimore Port?" "Roberto Vasquez, my mother's brother's son. He helped with big ships, container load." Elena had memorized Roberto's complete fictional biography, including childhood stories and family relationships that would satisfy most background investigations. Davidson nodded, but his suspicion hadn't diminished. "I want you to call him, right? Tell him I need to verify something about this week's shipping schedules." Elena felt sweat forming beneath her uniform. This was exactly the kind of test that could expose elaborate deep cover operations. But Army intelligence had prepared for this scenario, establishing Roberto Vasquez as more than just documentation. He existed as a living, breathing cover story. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number that routed through multiple encrypted relays to a secure facility in Quantica. After 2 rings, a voice answered with perfect Baltimore accent and diction. "Roberto speaking." "Roberto, Elena, hay un hombre aquí que quiere hablar sobre tu trabajo." She handed the phone to Davidson, whose Spanish was good enough to understand she had told Roberto that someone wanted to discuss his work. The conversation lasted 5 minutes. Army intelligence had spent months building Roberto's legend, creating employment records, social media presence, even neighbors who could vouch for his existence. Davidson questioned everything from port procedures to Baltimore Ravens statistics. When he handed the phone back, his expression had relaxed slightly, but Elena could see he wasn't entirely convinced. That evening, Elena sat in her modest Arlington apartment, surrounded by intelligence materials that would have terrified the criminals she had been investigating if they realized their cleaning lady was building cases against them. Photographs, documents, recorded conversations, and financial records created a comprehensive map of Blackwood's arms trafficking network. Her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Colonel Martinez, her handler, Davidson ran deep background check on Elena Vasquez's identity, cover holding but showing stress fractures. Recommend immediate extraction. Elena studied the intelligence board covering her living room wall. 18 months of meticulous work had identified weapons shipments to 7 countries, corrupt officials in 12 cities, and financial networks spanning 4 continents. But the keystone evidence, the central server data that would expose the entire operation, remained locked in Blackwood's secure systems. She typed back, negative on extraction. Final package in reach. Needs 72 hours to complete primary objective. Martinez's response came quickly. Too dangerous. Davidson's counterintelligence background makes him exceptional threat. Abort and extract. Elena made the decision that would define the rest of her career. Understood risk. Mission takes priority. Will deliver package within 48 hours regardless. The next morning she arrived at Blackwater knowing it would likely be her last day as Elena Vasquez. Davidson was waiting in the lobby, his presence no coincidence. "Elena, I need you to work second floor today instead of your usual areas," he announced, watching her reaction carefully. She nodded obediently while recognizing the tactical assessment. Davidson was changing her routine to observe how she responded, testing whether she had specific interest in particular areas of the building. "Of course, sir. Whatever you need." But Davidson had made a critical error. By restricting her to the second floor, he had inadvertently given her access to the building's main server room, a secured area where Blackwood's organization stored its most sensitive digital communications. Elena spent the morning mapping security protocols while cleaning second-floor office. By lunch she had identified a 15-minute window when automated systems would allow access without triggering alerts. That night, she would either complete the most important intelligence operation of her career, or die attempting it. At 11:47 p.m., Elena returned to Blackwater using security codes she had memorized from months of watching night guards. The building's skeleton crew consisted of 2 guards, one in the lobby, another making rounds every 30 minutes. She had 14 minutes to reach the server room, extract the data, and escape before the next security sweep. Moving through darkened corridors with tactical precision, she avoided every camera angle and motion sensor she had cataloged during 18 months of observation. The server room required biometric access she had defeated using latex fingerprints created from prints lifted during cleaning duties. As the heavy door sealed behind her, Elena connected her extraction device to the main server, initiating download of encrypted files that would expose the entire arms trafficking network. 8 minutes remaining on the download, enough time to complete the mission that had cost her 18 months of her life. The server room hummed with the electronic whisper of machines processing communications that connected arms dealers across 3 continents. Elena worked with surgical precision, her extraction device pulling terabytes of encrypted data while she photographed physical documents stored in secured filing cabinets. Financial records showing payments to corrupt officials in Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. Shipping manifests detailing weapons transfers disguised as agricultural equipment. Communication logs implicating 37 individuals in conspiracy to violate international arms trafficking agreement. With 3 minutes remaining on the download, Elena heard something that made her blood freeze. Footsteps in the corridor, moving with purpose rather than routine patrol patterns. Davidson's voice carried through the walls. Motion sensors triggered on second floor. Lock down all exits and sweep every room. Elena realized she had underestimated Blackwood's security upgrades. New sensors had been installed since her last reconnaissance, creating detection patterns she hadn't identified. The careful timeline she had constructed was collapsed. 2 minutes on the download. The footsteps were getting closer. Elena made a decision that would either save the mission or end her life. Instead of aborting, she activated the building's fire suppression system, triggering chemical releases and alarms throughout the facility while transmitting a burst communication to her handlers containing all data gathered during 18 months of deep cover. As chaos erupted throughout Blackwater, Elena prepared for direct confrontation. The invisible cleaning lady was about to become very visible. The download completed just as Davidson kicked open the server room door, revealing Elena in tactical gear with her extraction device in hand. Behind him stood 3 armed guards, weapons drawn and ready. "Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, United States Army Intelligence," Davidson said with grim satisfaction. "I've been investigating you for 6 months. Roberto Vasquez doesn't exist. Your fingerprints were surgically altered. And your family farm in Honduras?" He shook his head. "Burned down 4 years ago in a cartel attack." Elena realized Davidson had been building a case while allowing her to continue gathering intelligence, possibly hoping to identify her entire support network. How long have you known? Since you corrected my Spanish grammar 8 months ago. Native speakers from Tegucigalpa don't use Guatemalan dialect patterns. Small mistake, but I notice small mistakes. Elena calculated distances and angles while Davidson continued talking. The fire suppression system had created perfect cover, and her 18 months of studying the building's layout provided tactical advantages. The data you stole contains information that could compromise operations in 12 countries. But more importantly, it confirms that someone in Army intelligence has been feeding information to our competitors. Congratulations, you've identified yourself as the leak we've been hunting. Elena felt pieces clicking into place. Blackwood's operation wasn't just arms trafficking, it was a counterintelligence trap designed to identify penetration attempts by U.S. intelligence agencies. She had spent 18 months gathering evidence against an organization that had been gathering evidence against. The weapons shipments are real, she said, understanding the scope of the deception. Of course they're real. The best cover stories are mostly true, but now we know exactly how Army intelligence operations work, who runs them, and how to defeat them. Elena had walked into the most sophisticated counterintelligence operation she had ever encountered. Elena's mind raced through implications while assessing tactical options. The fire suppression chemicals provided concealment, but Davidson's team had positioned themselves to control every exit route. 18 months of careful intelligence work had led her into a trap sophisticated enough to turn her mission against itself. You're wondering how we identified you so early, Davidson said, clearly enjoying the revelation. Simple answer: we didn't. We identified the operation. He gestured to his guards who moved to flank Elena's position. Army intelligence has a predictable methodology. Deep cover assets always establish family connections to justify their presence. They always choose identities from countries with limited records verification, and they always target the same operational pattern. Elena realized she was facing something unprecedented, a criminal organization that had reverse-engineered U.S. intelligence methods and created countermeasures specifically designed to exploit them. Blackwood's operation is real, Davidson continued, but it's also big. We've been running this facility for 3 years, identifying intelligence penetration attempts from 6 different agencies: CIA, NSA, DEA, Army intelligence. All of you use the same basic approaches. The weapons shipments we intercepted were shipped exactly as discussed. We're not pretending to be arms dealers, Lieutenant. We are arms dealers, but we're also intelligence gatherers for people who pay better than your government. Elena felt her training assert itself as the scope of the betrayal became clear. Blackwood wasn't just running arms to Central American gangs, he was selling intelligence about U.S. counterterrorism operations to the highest bidders. Every Elena Vasquez we've identified has provided information about American operational procedures. Davidson's, your predecessors confirmed Army intelligence capabilities, NSA surveillance methods, CIA liaison protocols. You've been particularly useful because you've been here longest. Elena processed this information while calculating her odds of survival. She had transmitted the crucial data to her handlers, but Davidson's revelation meant that transmission might have been intercepted and analyzed for intelligence value. The burst transmission you sent 30 seconds ago, Davidson smiled coldly, was received by our communications team and immediately forwarded to clients in Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran. Congratulations, you've just provided hostile governments with detailed information about Army intelligence operational procedures. Elena realized the depth of the trap. Every action she had taken to complete her mission had instead compromised American intelligence operations. But her training provided one crucial insight. Davidson was talking too much, revealing information he wouldn't share if she was simply going to disappear quietly. You're not going to kill me, she said, understanding beginning to dawn. You need me alive. Very good, Lieutenant. You're going to help us expand our intelligence collection, starting with detailed information about Army intelligence training procedures, handler protocols, and most importantly, the identities of other assets currently operating under deep cover. Elena smiled for the first time in 18 months, not the submissive expression of Elena Vasquez, but the predatory confidence of Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell. Actually, she said, I'm going to burn your entire operation to the ground. The chemicals from the fire suppression system provided perfect concealment for someone who had never forgotten how to fight. Elena moved with explosive precision, using the chemical fog as tactical cover, while 18 months of studying the building's layout provided crucial advantages. She disabled the first guard with a blood choke that dropped him unconscious in seconds, his weapon transferring smoothly to her hands. Davidson's military training kicked in immediately. Building lockdown initiated. Seal all exits. His voice echoed through the emergency communication system as he dove behind server equipment for cover. Elena had prepared for hostile extraction scenarios since beginning the operation. Every ventilation shaft, service tunnel, and emergency route had been memorized and tested. Blackwater's security measures were designed to prevent infiltration, not to contain trained operatives attempting escape. "You can't escape, Mitchell," Davidson called through the fog. "Every exit is monitored. Every route is blocked. Surrender and we can negotiate terms." Elena's response was tactical rather than verbal. She used her acquired weapon to destroy the building's main electrical distribution panel, plunging the facility into darkness, except for emergency lighting. In the chaos that followed, she moved through familiar corridors like a ghost, using service passages that didn't appear on official building schematics. The second guard fired blindly through the chemical haze, his shots sparking off metal fixtures while Elena used industrial architecture for cover. She returned fire with surgical precision, wounding rather than killing. Gathering intelligence remained her primary mission, not revenge. But Davidson's voice followed her through the darkness. "You think this changes anything? We have your complete operational profile now. Every technique you've used, every cover story you've constructed, every handler protocol you've followed, it's all documented and ready for But I also have yours," Elena replied from somewhere in the shadows, moving toward the building's utility room where months of observation had revealed Blackwood's critical vulnerability. The facility's entire security system operated from a central server that could be overloaded with the right electrical surge. Elena had memorized the exact sequence needed to create a temporary blackout that would reset all electronic locks while transmitting a final burst of intelligence to her handlers. As sparks flew from electrical panels, Davidson's voice turned desperate. "Mitch, you don't understand what you're interfering with. These operations prevent wars, maintain stability in regions where your government can't operate officially. These operations create the instability they claim to prevent," Elena shot back, working quickly to complete her sabotage. "Arms dealers don't want peace, they want manageable conflict." The electrical surge worked perfectly, dropping every security system in the building for exactly 97 seconds. Elena had calculated the timing precisely, giving herself just enough time to reach the roof access she had prepared as an emergency extraction point. Her final transmission contained more than just evidence of arms trafficking. It included detailed intelligence about the counterintelligence operation that had been targeting American assets, the identities of corrupt officials facilitating the conspiracy, and most important, financial records that would allow federal authorities to freeze assets across 12 countries. As emergency power restored building systems, Elena was already rappelling down the exterior wall, using climbing equipment cached during a previous maintenance assignment. Behind her, Blackwood's empire was about to collapse in ways Davidson couldn't imagine. 72 hours after Elena's escape from Blackwater, FBI tactical teams executed coordinated raids across Virginia, Maryland, and 3 Central American capitals. The intelligence Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had gathered during 18 months of deep cover operations provided evidence for the largest international arms trafficking prosecution in U.S. history. Elena sat in a secure debriefing facility at Fort Belvoir, watching news reports that confirmed the scope of her mission's success. Marcus Blackwood had been arrested attempting to board a private jet to non-extradition country. Davidson was cooperating with federal prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. Weapons caches worth $12 million had been seized from storage facilities across northern Virginia. Colonel Martinez entered with thick folders of arrest warrants and seizure orders. Thursday's weapons shipment to MS-13 was intercepted exactly as your intelligence predicted. 200 AK-47s that won't be killing Salvadoran security forces or American military advisors. Elena nodded, feeling the exhaustion that followed extended deep cover operation. For 18 months she had lived as Elena Vasquez, suppressing her own identity to gather evidence that would save American lives and prevent regional destabilization. But the counterintelligence aspect, Martinez continued, was something we hadn't anticipated. Blackwood's operation was collecting information about our methods and selling it to hostile intelligence services. Your mission exposed a security breach that could have compromised operations worldwide. Elena studied photographs of seized documents showing communications between Blackwood's organization intelligence agencies in Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran. They were learning our procedures by letting us think we were learning theirs. Exactly, but your tactical modifications during the final extraction provided intelligence about their collection methods that will allow us to adjust our operational security. The countermeasures you identified will protect future assets. Martinez placed a commendation letter on the table. Your performance has been noted at the highest levels of Army intelligence. There's discussion of reassignment to a specialized unit handling similar deep cover operations. Elena considered this while thinking about Elena Vasquez, the identity she had inhabited so completely that sometimes she had forgotten her real name. What happens to the Elena Vasquez legend? Retired permanently. The identity served its purpose. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell returns to active duty with promotion to captain and assignment wherever she chooses. As Elena prepared for her next career phase, Martinez handed her one final document. Personal message from the Honduran Minister of Defense. Intelligence you gathered allowed their security forces to intercept communications indicating MS-13 leadership had planned coordinated attacks on government buildings using the weapons Blackwood was shipped. Your work prevented what intelligence analysts assess would have been a successful coup attempt. Elena read the message, thinking about the invisible cleaning lady who had endured 18 months of condescension while gathering evidence that would preserve democratic governments most Americans couldn't locate on a map. Sometimes the most important victories were achieved by people whose names would never appear in newspapers, whose sacrifices would never be publicly acknowledged, whose service would remain classified long after the crises they prevented were forgotten. Elena Vasquez had disappeared forever. Captain Sarah Mitchell would continue serving in whatever shadows her country required. 6 months later, Captain Sarah Mitchell stood in a classified briefing room at the Pentagon, addressing a select group of intelligence officials about the implications of Operation Silent Witness. Her 18-month deep cover investigation had become a case study in both successful asset deployment and counterintelligence threats. The Blackwood operation succeeded because it exploited predictable patterns in our deep cover methodology, Sarah explained to the assembled officials. They identified our standard approaches and created countermeasures specifically designed to turn our operations against us. Admiral Patricia Hayes, Director of Defense Intelligence, leaned forward. Captain Mitchell, your tactical modifications during extraction prevented this counterintelligence operation from compromising other assets. How do we prevent similar penetrations in the future? Sarah had spent months analyzing the lessons learned from Elena Vasquez's operational experience. We need to randomize our cover identity construction, vary our infiltration patterns, and most importantly, establish better protocols for detecting when our operations are being observed and analyzed. The psychological assessment indicates you maintained operational effectiveness despite 18 months of systematic deception and social isolation, noted Dr. Rachel Morrison, the military psychologist who had been monitoring Sarah's post-mission adjustment. What recommendations do you have for supporting long-term deep cover assets? Sarah thought about Elena Vasquez, the invisible woman who had cleaned offices while documenting crimes, who had endured condescension while gathering intelligence that would save lives. Deep cover operations require more than just tactical preparation. Assets need psychological anchors that remind them who they really are beneath the false identity. After the briefing, Sarah walked through Arlington National Cemetery, stopping at Section 60 where casualties from recent conflicts were buried. Many of these soldiers had died from weapons that originated in the same black market networks she had helped expose. Her phone buzzed with a message from Colonel Martinez, new assignment available. Deep cover operation, estimated duration 24 months, target human trafficking network operating through diplomatic facilities. Interest. Sarah studied the message while surrounded by graves of service members who had died fighting enemies armed with illegal weapons. The choice represented a fundamental decision about her career trajectory. Return to conventional intelligence assignments where her accomplishments might eventually be recognized, or disappear again into deep cover, where her work would save lives that would never know her name. She typed back, "Send detailed briefing materials. When do I start?" That evening, Sarah began studying the background materials for Maria Santos, a hotel housekeeper whose identity would provide access to diplomatic facilities where traffickers operated under the protection of diplomatic immunity. Like Elena Vasquez before her, Maria would be invisible, overlooked, perfectly positioned to gather evidence that conventional intelligence operations couldn't obtain. As she prepared to disappear into another carefully constructed identity, Sarah reflected on the nature of service that operated in shadows. The most important battles were often fought by people who could never be publicly thanked, whose names would never appear in official histories, whose victories would be measured in lives saved rather than medals earned. But somewhere in El Salvador, government security forces were alive because of intelligence gathered by a cleaning lady no one had bothered to notice. For some missions, that recognition was enough. 3 years later, Agent Maria Santos walked through the corridors of the Honduran embassy in Washington, D.C., her housekeeping cart concealing surveillance equipment that had documented an extensive human trafficking operation operating under diplomatic protection. Like Elena Vasquez before her, Maria was invisible. Another overlooked service worker whose presence barely registered among the diplomats and officials she was investigating. But Captain Sarah Mitchell had learned from her previous deep cover experience. This time, she maintained stronger psychological boundaries, regular encrypted contact with her handlers, and clearer extraction protocols. The lessons learned from 18 months as Elena Vasquez had made her a more effective operative while preserving her mental health. As she cleaned the ambassador's office, Sarah listened to conversations about shipping manifests that disguised human cargo as diplomatic baggage. The trafficking network moved over 400 victims annually through diplomatic channels, believing their status made them untouchable. They were wrong. Sarah's investigation had already mapped safe houses in 15 cities, documented financial transfers through 8 countries, and identified a network that would be dismantled within weeks. Tonight would mark her final evidence gathering, before federal task forces moved to shut down the entire operation. Her secure phone vibrated with a message from her current handler. Extraction confirmed for 03. Sarah continued dusting diplomatic furniture while reflecting on the evolution of her career. She had discovered a calling that combined her intelligence training with an unusual talent for becoming genuinely invisible, for gathering evidence in situations where conventional investigation was impossible. The traffickers would never understand how their operation had been exposed. They would blame security failures, communication intercepts, financial investigations, anything except the possibility that their housekeeper had been documenting their crimes for 2 years. As Sarah prepared for extraction, she thought about the cost and reward of justice that operated in shadow. Elena Vasquez had taught her that sometimes the most effective weapon against organized crime was the ability to become genuinely invisible, while systematically gathering evidence that would save innocent lives. After tonight, Maria Santos would disappear forever, just as Elena Vasquez had before her. But the intelligence network Sarah had exposed would prevent hundreds of cases of human trafficking, protect vulnerable populations, and demonstrate that diplomatic immunity couldn't shield criminal organizations from determined investigation. 5 days later, Captain Sarah Mitchell received orders for her next assignment, a defense contractor suspected of selling classified technology to hostile foreign government. Her cover identity would be Rebecca Park, a night shift security guard whose access to secure facilities would position her to document evidence of technological espionage. Sarah accepted the assignment without hesitation. She had found her purpose in the shadows between official action and necessary justice, protecting the innocent by becoming invisible among the guilty. Some heroes wore uniforms and received public recognition. Others wore service worker clothing and cleaned up corruption from the inside, one careful observation at a time. Both served their country with equal dedication. Only one would be remembered in official history.